With that being said, it is my great delight to introduce you to our moderator and planner extraordinaire. And I hope I can now call my friend all the way from County Donegal, close to where my family's from. Please welcome to guide us through today's conversation, Liz Doherty.
Thank you so much, Tressa, for the lovely introduction. And hello, everybody. It is just fantastic to be spending a wet, rainy Donegal afternoon in such great company and with all you guys at home as well, talking about a subject that gets us all out of bed in the morning and brings joy to our lives, which is about teaching tradition, teaching the next generation and passing on all of these great traditions that we're so lucky to have in our own lives. So it's all about the sunny side out now in these times that we find ourselves in, and share the joy of what it is that we do. And all of us who do spend our lives teaching, we're doing it because we do love it. It's really what motivates us. We're all musicians, but teaching it and sharing it with other people certainly is a big part of what inspires me. But it is a tough old job. Teaching can be challenging. And certainly in terms of Irish traditional music, you kind of have to figure out your own curriculum, you make up your own pedagogy, you have to gather your own resources, and you kind of have to do all this by yourself. There's not a whole lot of support and training there for teachers. And it's something that I have become a bit obsessed about, because just because we're musicians doesn't automatically translate into making us great teachers. And what can we do to help other people teach so that they feel confident and empowered and happy to do it? And as I say, I've just recently given up my job as an academic because I tried to do this within the confines of academia and nothing was moving fast enough for me. So I've just left my job there to kind of get closer to the music, closer to the teachers, and try and make a difference. And this is a fantastic opportunity to sit with these amazing musicians and teachers now from around the world to talk some more about this very topic. And really looking forward to connecting with all you guys at home as well. Any questions that you have, let's all jump in and see what we can all take away and share and learn from our little block of time here together. So we'll see on the screens our fantastic technical team. Jared there in the background will be sharing some slides of our agenda with us. I'm not going to bore you with all the details about myself there. You can read that in your own time. But I am a fiddle player from Buncrana up in the northern part of Ireland in County Donegal. And I've been teaching traditional music for over 30 years. That actually pains me to say that out loud. I'm getting ancient. But anyway, 30 years it is, so I'll have to stick with that. That's my story. And we look at that map of what we'll talk as we go along. But enough about me. I'm really excited to introduce you to our fantastic panelists here. And first of all, we have from the Ottawa Valley in Canada, the amazing April Birch. And April, I was a fan of April's music a long time before I ever met her. And I'm happy to say we've been great friends for a long number of years now. We've met on several occasions. And at my very first effort at having a house party in my house, a house concert at my house in Donegal, it was actually April and her band who came and performed, and all the kids still talk about that. It was a real special time for us. So it's fantastic to speak to April, who, as well as being a great performer and recording artist, has such vast experience teaching in her own private practice with all summer camps around the world, and has also developed a method for teaching Canadian fiddle, and of course has all the insight that teachers should know about the contest scene as a performer and as a teacher. So we'll hear lots about that from April as the afternoon goes on. Unfortunately, our panelist from Ghana, Dr. Gamali Tordro, was not able to join us today, but I'm so excited to welcome Sharat all the way from New Delhi. And we thought we weren't going to make this happen, but we did. So lovely to see you, Sharat.
Great. Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yes, indeed. And like Gameli, Sharat and myself were introduced by a mutual friend, Amy Geddes, who is a fiddle player and teacher in Edinburgh in Scotland. and Amy was instrumental in kind of connecting us all as teachers. So Sharat is a really interesting voice on the panel today because he is a classical violinist in the North Indian tradition and a rock musician. And I'm so excited to have this opportunity to talk about teaching from a wider perspective. Often as traditional and folk musicians, we look down through our own lens. And I know from some of your own teaching and learning methods that there's a lot that we'll all learn from your experience. And so we might open the floor to you first, Sharat, if you're happy for that. And just ask you about your learning experience, learning the violin with your grandfather.
Yeah, sure. Bernard, and lovely to meet you all. Am I audible?
Good here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So basically, I'll tell you a little bit about me in a very violin playing in the northern style. We have two different styles in India, North Indian and South Indian. So I grew up learning the North. And I learned the violin from my grandfather, my guru, Pandit Joy Srivastava. So we always had music, and my grandfather getting all his students, from all over and coming and staying with us. So the beauty about this teaching tradition of Indian classical music is that the student goes to guru's house. It's not like one class a week or two classes a week. So this tradition of learning the violin or music is called Guru Shishya Parampara, which is like a guru means guru and Shishya means student. I have been teaching violin to my students last 30 years in the same manner. So my students come home and stay with me, and then they learn this art form.
Wow. And how long would they stay with you for a typical teaching block?
Just to keep you in mind. Sorry?
How long, or how many weeks or days would they spend with you? Okay, we seem to be having some issues connecting. We've managed to get Sharat in person, but
you are playing your hello, yeah. Hello, yeah. Is it better now?
That's better.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it better now?
That's perfect, yes.
Great. So basically, the student learns this art form living. So this is how I learned. So basically, there is no fixed time of practice. You are getting up, you're eating music, you're sleeping music, you're just carrying on. This is the way we have learned music from our respective gurus and teachers, and this is how we teach. Okay, teaching in the game, but going to a guru's house and then learning this art form is very special, and this is what we follow.
Sounds amazing. It's like the whole immersive experience. It really does sound very special, and certainly in Irish music, lots of people grow up in families that have lots of music handed down through the generations. But if we don't, it's a real richness that you'd be missing. Okay, thank you for that, Sharat. April, I'll jump to you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Liz.
Right, okay. So that amazing experience of living with your teacher and getting the whole immersive opportunity, is that something that is familiar to you? Did you have that experience, or how did you learn?
No, it's not. I was just thinking how amazing that sounded as well. I took lessons from a local teacher and learned to play by ear. He didn't read music. He was a teenager himself and had been taught by an older fiddler that was self-taught. So his technique wasn't great. He didn't, you know, I was 6 years old and he didn't really tell me how to hold the fiddle and the bow properly because he hadn't been taught how to do that properly. And so, you know, he would just tape things for me. He developed sort of a code system on his own if there were parts I couldn't figure out so that I could try to read that. But that was sort of my beginnings. I will say that I was really lucky in the Ottawa Valley in northeastern Ontario, where I grew up, there were a lot of dances. There was a Renfrew County Fiddlers group that would have a dance once a month. There were contests, there were jam sessions, jamborees. And so the immersive part was being a young child, getting to go to these different events and be among so many passionate fiddlers of different ages, different skill levels. I remember living for that. I remember being the only kid in my school that played the fiddle and just waiting for those events to get together with other fiddlers. So not nearly as immersive, but still very, very fortunate to have that firsthand experience.
Nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. And just, I think both of you guys, like, that has really come out, that idea of it's not just the direct teaching that happens with the teacher, it's the wider experience, it's hearing other music, it's seeing how other people are around music, how other musicians experience it, how other people light up with it, that it's not the music, is the lessons are not in isolation, but that wider contextual piece is so important. Absolutely. And for ourselves, you know, what do we see as good teaching in our respective traditions? So if you think about, you know, that mix of lessons and then the wider connection with other musicians being you know, a great way to experience music, is there anything you would add into that mix when you talk about what good teaching looks like?
I'll go first. So I think it's really important, you know, I guess right now I'm filtering all this through the lens of teaching by Zoom and Skype, which I have been for the last few months, which is new. And so, you know, interacting with people all over the world that have very different experiences with their local community and really trying to give them a sense through personal stories what that community looked like for me growing up. And trying to give them, you know, links to videos that might explain that. Like, instead of just talking about a dance, saying, here's a video of people waltzing to a Canadian waltz, because we play it a little differently and it's a different speed. Can you learn to waltz? And talking about the importance of, you know, we play a waltz because people used to dance to these waltzes, you know, every weekend. And that's how you get the groove. And if you don't know how to do the dance, it's hard to get the groove. And it's not just about technique and tunes and skill. It's about the history of the tradition. Why we approach it the way we do is because of where it came from and what that meant. And so I think, to me, it's important to give a context, even if it's remotely, for why we do things the way that we do, and just trying to bring them into that community and share that passion and that history along with the tunes.
Absolutely, yeah. Sharat, is that your experience as well? What other elements of good teaching are you familiar with?
Is it after the COVID situation or before or in general?
Just in general, in the passing on of the tradition then. So you have this lovely immersive approach, and then what happens within that? How does the guru pass on the music? So the student is looking and watching and learning, but is there anything specific?
Yeah, so basically, you know, what happens, the special thing, the most special thing that happens in this is the bond between the student and the teacher. They establish a great relationship. Like my grandfather was my guru and he was my best friend. I started learning when I was 7. So I think we shared so many laughs together and the talks and music. So basically, the idea is the guru is not only teaching the violin or music, he's teaching you about life, about values, how you can, uh, it's how you can, value the and this precious knowledge of music, which he's passing on. And also, very important thing, it's very spiritual. This Indian classical music learning, it's very spiritual, it's very meditative and very therapeutic. And guru always teaches you that should not rush for things, you should not hurry up, things take time. So the time period that's been designed to learn any art form before a student gets on to stage is about 12 years or something, minimum 12 years. So it's like a way of life. And also one more thing which is very important is that my guru said to me that, Sharad, I have learned, let's say I had about 150 years of experience from my gurus. Okay, so 150 years experience he got from his guru. And when he gave me that knowledge, you add 50 years more. So what he gave me was 200 years of experience. So this is how the thing is passed on. And also one very beautiful thing he used to say, that like I learned from my grandfather, so before I die, I have to pass it on to others. I have to spread this knowledge, give it to all the people, and it's like a loan. It's like a beautiful loan which you have to pay back to other students. So which is a very beautiful thing that I learned from him. And it's very meaningful, and the bond that you establish is great. And so it's all about way of life and living life as a simple man, believe in simplicity and believe in, be calm and then learn this art form.
That is beautiful, absolutely. And I love what you were saying about the stretch of the learning, that it doesn't have to be rushed.
Yeah.
That is so important to hear. I think sometimes, with all the access to resources that young learners have now, that they can learn a lot of technique really quickly and become really proficient. But the depth isn't there. They haven't had time.
Exactly. It's so important. You said it correctly, Liz. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's something that as teachers we need to, certainly it's something that I'm thinking about quite a lot, because it's not about rushing them through it, because then what? We're all on this lifelong learning journey as musicians. We're all on it.
And exactly. And sometimes, these students, who come to me to learn, so I just tell them that you gotta surrender yourself to learn this art form. You can't be learning violin or any other art form and then, perform it on stage in 2 months' time. No, that's not going to happen.
Loving that. Yeah, but it's just the richness of the experience. It's not even just a reality check. It's the richness of the experience. They can do playing is one part of it, but the knowledge, the living it, the lived experience, and that only comes through time.
Yeah.
And I think just that, reminder that it's a lifelong learning journey that we're all on. I'm still learning.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important, and for a message as well to the parents as well, who are keen to have them go through the ranks and finish, because we don't want to be finished with it. We want to be doing it right till the bitter end, and that's great, and I'm really interested to hear that. That is fantastic. And April, what you were speaking with kind of brings us on to the next agenda item, the articulating the music then in an accessible way. When you were talking about in the class, you get shown that your teacher, was a young teacher, was able to demonstrate. But how do you as a teacher use words, as well as you talked about sharing stories, other ways of articulating rather than just, here, this is what I do, copy that? how other ways do you draw that out in your teaching practice?
That's a wonderful question, and I think about that a lot. Part of it is through personal stories, definitely. But the other thing that I've learned is that instead of always demonstrating, sometimes if we stop and ask our students questions, to try and get them to come up with the answers themselves or approach it themselves, because repetition is a wonderful way to learn, but there's not the same inventiveness. And you might decide to play an ornament a little bit differently than me. It might just be the speed of it, and if I show you that, you're going to play it like me. But if I say, start with the melody note and then go one note above and back, but all in one bow, just try, see if you can do that, and see how it comes out. It goes a long way to helping them develop their own sound and their own style rather than replicating me.
Wow, beautiful.
It's brilliant, because that is one of our challenges, isn't it? Because we don't want to create all these student clones of ourselves. So we want to kind of have them invested in the tradition and with that deep knowledge, but also then the facility to find their own voices. How do you tackle that, Sharat? How do you, Sharat, encourage your students to be individual musicians? Have you any particular methods or systems that you use to encourage that in your students?
See, my style of teaching, or the things that I concentrate on to groom a student, like my son, he's 15 years old, and I'm teaching him exactly the same way as my grandfather taught to me. So I'm following exactly, because the compositions which are like 2 to 3, 3, 4, 400 years old, I have no right to change them. They should be played in a very strict manner. So when you're talking about Indian classical music, it's very strict. But when you talk about rock, that's where, or experiment like folk music or world music, if you're experimenting with others, big bands or jazz or whatever, over there you have the right to experiment and go and take any direction to fuse your music with others. But what I'm teaching is to give them a 360-degree perception about music. They should know, okay, fine, they're learning Indian classical music, but they should know what Celtic music is. They should know what reels are, what ragas are. They should know what flamenco is. They should know jazz a bit. So I want to give them all kinds of, I play them some of my influences to become aware of what kind of world music exists in the world, and then come back and figure out their own Indian classical way.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great, and that's a really interesting topic that you've touched on there, and it's one that I know I've had to answer an awful lot of times. I'm from Ireland, and I spent a lot of time in Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia in Canada.
Oh yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Oh, amazing! And totally love the music and the tunes, but don't play anywhere at all, or never tried to play in a Cape Breton style. But I love the tunes, and I often take them and play them in my own style. And I kind of always felt that because I learned the history of the music, and I knew the composers, and I knew the way that it should be played authentically, that it was okay for me to play it as long as I was aware of it and let other people listening to it, that I wasn't playing it authentically. I was playing it because it was a good tune. And I think there's a nuance there that I've always felt was important. And sometimes, I would have done a lot of examining in universities, and they hate to see me coming because I talk about, borrowing tunes from lots of tradition and playing this eclectic mix of music that isn't really authentic to anybody. And just wondering, how to encourage that diversity and that widespread knowledge, but going a bit deeper into it, so that at least if you're not following a tradition, that you're aware of the, and respectful of where it comes from and what it means in its original place. And it's, again, I guess, April, it comes back to your idea of the stories and the context, that is one way of maybe ensuring that our learners know that it's okay to to move
Yeah.
far, but find out the detail as well, so that you're not doing it without that due authenticity and respect as well. Or am I too cranky as a teacher, maybe?
No, you're speaking right to my heart. Because I grew up in the Ottawa Valley tradition, and that's my roots. But when you're exposed to other things that you love, you need to play what you love, because that's what you communicate the best. And so I've really dabbled in a bunch of different fiddle styles, and it comes back for me to what you said about making it clear when I'm sharing a tune, saying this is where this tune comes from. I'm not from there, but let me tell you about the source. And that's something that I speak a lot about with my students. When I teach them a tune, we find the earliest source of that tune that we can to listen to. And then I ask them to try and compare the source version with other versions, whether they're old or contemporary. The advantage that we do have now with YouTube and the internet is that it's easy for students to do their own research without spending a lot of to invest in a bunch of different materials. And so I think that that doing that, and then having respect for the tradition that you're pulling from, but putting enough of yourself into it so that you're clear that you're not trying to pretend to be something you're not.
Wow.
And so sometimes I've tried to play in a style where I never got to that point, or where it took me years before I would play it publicly. When I started to play old-time American tunes, I would play them in my bedroom, but never on stage, until I reached the point where I felt like I was paying respect to the tradition. I had to get it to a point where I felt like I could portray the tunes the way they should be played. And it took much longer than any other style for me because of the bowing differences. But I still say that, I'll say this is a tune from West Virginia and it was played by so-and-so. And I'm from Canada, so thanks for listening to a Canadian girl play this tune, because I just really love the melody, And so, yeah, I think just being open about that, but also encouraging it, like you said, because there's so many great styles out there, and that's what makes music beautiful, is being able to cross over.
Beautiful. Very nice.
Fantastic. Yeah, and that's great. And I can, know that all of that then kind of filters then into your teaching when you're encouraging young people to do the same thing. It's great when you have done it yourself. You're not just saying you should do this, this, this. Look, this is what I've done, and this is what I'm going to help you do as well. And it makes your teaching much more real. And I think students connect with that when they know that you've gone through the process before them. It's really important. But it's not always easy teaching, and sometimes there are some challenges, not least the whole COVID situation that we're finding ourselves in now. So as a teacher, Sharat, what challenges are you finding in the current environment with your teaching?
Well, I am teaching a lot on Skype these days, and I've got students in America and Europe. And the only thing is, when I get a beginner, it's very difficult to teach a beginner, giving online classes to a fresh beginner. That's challenging. But thankfully, I've got students who have learned Western classical and all these different art forms. They have been playing the violin, and now they are switching over to learn the Indian classical ragas from me. So over there, basically the idea is to, make sure they are doing the correct technique. And sometimes, I ask them to get close to the camera, show me the finger movements and the bowing and the slides that we use. So these are the challenges that we do it. But so far, I would say my teaching has been going fine. But yeah, nothing like, having one-to-one lesson, sitting with the student and, practicing together for a number of hours. Here, the thing is, every class is like 45 minutes to an hour, and that's it. Then the next student is online. So everything is like very, very scheduled. But the way we as students and gurus are used to is, one lesson starts in one raga can go on for 4 hours. You know, that kind of situation is not existing anymore. I mean, I hope not for too long though.
Oh, I know, I know. I'm very impressed though that you've been teaching people from scratch, from right from the beginning, over Zoom or Skype. I had a situation with one of my fiddle students where I realized I obviously always tune their fiddle in the class for them. So we had our first Skype session when I was like, I need to tune my fiddle. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to do this now from a distance. So it was one of those moments going,
Yes,
note
that
to
was
self.
also another challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. So that wasn't a happy moment, but the mommy stepped in and helped, so it was all good, and now they can do it. So we all learned. And for me,
Yeah.
I'm finding that actually, because the parents are there. Oh, there we have Gamelli. Hi there.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
It's great to see you. Thank you for finally technology worked in our favor. Fantastic.
Yes.
We're
And
just
it seems to
talking.
be clear as well.
Oh, good. We're just talking about COVID and teaching online and some of the challenges that
Yes.
it's presenting for all of us, but also
Yes.
some of the positives, you know. And I was just saying that for me, the parents, having them there, you know, supervising the kids, you know, logging
Yes.
on and logging off, actually they've become a lot more invested in the learning.
That's
And
right.
it's really worked, you know, because the
Yeah.
kids are, you know, the mommy or daddy hears what they're going to practice, and then they have to do it rather than dropping them off at the class and running. So
Yeah,
that's
and sometimes they join in as well.
yes. So what has your experience been in teaching through COVID? Has it been a challenge or has it been an opportunity?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't been teaching a lot. However, way before COVID, I was using WhatsApp to teach because some of my students are in Ghana. And so we communicate a lot on WhatsApp. So it's been quite interesting the way we can really quickly adapt to the challenges posed by COVID. So it's been a lot of text and sometimes audio recording and a mixture of that. You know, recently what we've done is a number of conferences and symposia on Zoom. Yeah, and Zoom has been really, really good in reimagining, you know, new ways of using technology. Before COVID, we didn't think that we would put all our programs on Zoom, for instance. But at the University of Glasgow, we are doing that. And we are using Future Learn as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. And we're so lucky, you know, in a lot of ways, aren't we, that as musicians and as music teachers, we can use the technology to continue what we're doing.
Yes.
It's not as good as being in the room, of course, but, you know, there are lots of other art forms and other activities that don't translate into you know, virtual worlds. And sometimes when it's wrecking my head, I have to take a step back and just be thankful that we have it and that we're able to, you know, do something to keep us all connected as well. April, I want to ask you specifically a question about contests and competitions, because this was a big part of your learning growing up. And I just wonder, as a teacher, what your views are on competitions and the whole contest scene.
Well, yeah, it was a big part of my growing up. But like we talked about at the beginning, a lot of it had to do with, that was the time I got to be around other young people that like to play the fiddle. I think since that time, contests are wonderful because they do keep people striving and setting goals. But there's also a danger that I have encountered with some of my students, and we talk a lot about this. I always tell them, okay, here comes a lecture. But you know, there is such an emphasis sometimes, and a lot of my students are very self-driven in a wonderful way, but when they're focusing on a contest, they're looking to play 9 or 12 tunes really, really well. They stop building their repertoire. They stop thinking of the larger context and maybe playing for a dance or all these other things that used to happen. So we talk a lot about that, and I think it's really beneficial to have these contests and set goals, but we also talk about being a well-rounded musician and what that means, and just setting goals outside of that. In addition to, there's almost in some fiddle styles and step dance styles, there's almost another genre which is contest driven, and it sounds different than if you played the same tune for a dance. And so I just like them to be aware of that.
Very good, very good. The same here. We have a massive organisation with a huge global reach for Irish music learning called Coltis, and competition is a big part of the work that that organisation does. And again, hugely motivating for the children learning. They like having those kind of goals, short-term goals. But again, when it's part of the learning and it's not the whole learning, I think it works best that it is good that they know that discipline and that focus and, you know, preparing for that moment where you're going to bring the performance that you need to bring, but that it's not the only way. And I think keeping, as you say, that wider perspective that it's part of the tradition, but not all of it, is really important. Fantastic. Do you guys have any experiences, the contest or competition part of either of your experience, Gamelli?
Yes. Back in the days in Ghana, when I was in school and secondary school, we did a lot of competitions, inter-schools competitions that went into inter-regions competitions. So Ghana is divided into a number of regions. So you do the local competitions, and then there's a qualifying group that goes to the next stage, which would be the districts, and then it goes to the regional competition and goes to the national competition. So my experience as a student was in those competitions. So from poetry to music to dance, we had a series of competitions. And so preparing for those competitions became the context in which you learn. But as well, the flip side of that is the collaboration that has to go on between you, you know, as a group, in order to make the competition work, in order to win some, if not all of the competitions. And I find that the interaction that's involved in collaborating is very key in becoming, you know, in developing your profession as an artist, because you would always have to collaborate with others, you know. Even in the context of competition, you still have to collaborate with others.
And yeah, and collaboration, of course, is, as teachers, something that we have to create the conditions for
Yes.
our learners to collaborate
Yes.
all the time, because, you know, one-to-one lessons, you know, allows them the deep dive into technique and, you know, that real kind of keen watching and learning and responding and so on. But they need to be able to play with other players, and finding ways as part of our teaching to make that happen is really important. And absolutely, the competitions is one way in which that can happen. Gamelli, I know you joined us late, and I'd love to ask you about something we spoke about by phone some weeks ago. You talked about one of your passions is about bringing back ways of teaching that you felt were disappearing. Maybe you could take a little minute and explain some of that to us. I'm sure all of our listeners would love to hear about that.
Yes. Let me apologize for coming in late. I thought it's 4 o'clock my time, so I kind of got the time messed up a bit. So my apologies for that. Yes. So when I was growing up, I realized that the way we learn is actually way from the womb. the way we learn music is, the sounds come to us right from when you're in your mother's womb, because she's doing all these chores that are rhythmical. So back in Ghana till today, when people wake up, mostly around 4 a.m., they'll be sweeping, and once a person is sweeping, they're singing a tune, or the whoosh whoosh of the broom, is on a certain rhythm. When they're cooking, it's rhythm and melody, and so all that is a part of everyday life. So you realize that when kids are born, they're already tuned to those rhythms and melodies and sounds, and so it becomes very easy for children to just naturally move into musicalities of the everyday life. But then there is a whole system of informal learning that happens because music most of the time is part of everyday life. It's not removed like you find in the Western world, where you have to begin learning music in school and learn it technically and so on and so forth. You learn it like you learn language. So every child sings. You just have to say, "Can you sing me this song?" And then the child is singing. But here, even my kids, when I ask them to sing, it's a tug of. So there is that. And then there is also a system where it is it's part of the family. So there are families that play this instrument, there are families that play that instrument. So you grow up in it. What I realize is that when we begin to formalize the learning of music, there is also another way of considering how the teaching and learning process can be reciprocal. So the teacher is a learner and the learner is a teacher. And when that happens, because the hierarchies are broken down, there's such a rich environment. I learn a lot from my students because they have technique that they bring to the classroom, technique that I may not be exposed to. So we exchange. And most of the time, I get people in the round. So everybody can see everybody and interact on different levels. So I call that an environment of treasured opportunities, because at every single moment there is a new opportunity that can emerge, and to be able to recognize that and use it, so that even though you may have a structured program in your head, that structured program should be breathable. It should be flexible to admit emergence, to admit improvisation. The other thing is just learning by looking, learning by listening. Most of African music is unwritten, so you have to learn by memory. You have to learn just the same way as you learn a language, and so music, dance becomes another language, or other layers of languages, and so people can communicate with that. So what happens is that once you are in a group, whether it's a group of 2, 3, 4, 5, it doesn't matter what the size of the group is. When you're performing music, or when you're doing music, or when you're practicing music, it's not just what you're playing, but what's happening between you and others. And we find that when my group, our orchestra, performs, one of the comments we get back from our audience is, "We can see the friendship between you. We can feel the friendship, the connection between you. And some people are so excited for us to know that they feel that they see that. And so for me, that becomes a very, very important aspect of the learning process and the sharing process, the interaction that happens between people. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And we heard that right across the piece today, that human connection, and that, you know, allowing the time for that to kind of happen naturally and to breathe, and those relationships to build and grow. That's where a lot of the richness in the learning happens, for sure. And what you were speaking about is, you know, when the learner is the teacher and the teacher is the learner. April, you were speaking recently about, you know, reminding yourself to step back into the student's shoes. Do you want to speak to that for a little second?
Yes, I come from the Ottawa Valley step dance tradition, and the grandfather of that style, Donnie Gilchrist, had a couple of protege students, and one was Buster Brown, who I took lessons from. The other was Gilles Roy, who I had never gotten a chance to dance with, and I asked him if I could become a student of his and go and take some lessons, which was wonderful, both to remind myself what it feels like to have a certain amount of skill level and then go back and try to relearn some things. He did some basic steps very differently, but also to have a different perspective on the tradition, you know, another student of the same person that had a completely different take, and his relationship to the community was different as well. So that was a really rich experience to me. Yeah.
Can I add something to that? So learning from somebody becomes a lifelong experience in what you take away. And what you take away can be both physical and intangible. And so one of my experiences is meeting other people who've learned from somebody who taught me, and knowing that those people were taught by the same person who taught me because they have with them musical instruments that that person had made. And I've had two very strong experiences. One in Denmark and the other one in Ireland, where I walked into a person I'm going to collaborate with home, and I see a drum that's just a replica of my drum. And I know exactly, without being told, that that drum is from Kemal, the person who taught me how to drum. And so what that means is that through that, you develop a different connection between yourself and the person you're meeting for the first time. So I've come out of experiences like that where I've been in the company of somebody for just 2 hours and it feels like 20 years, just because of the dynamics of the encounter.
Yeah, and music does that, doesn't it? That's what it's all about. It's about that connection. And again, as teachers, we're so privileged and so lucky to be able to share that and let others share in that as well. I'm going to jump on to the questions and answers just to give some of our listeners an opportunity for their voices to be heard now. So we might just have time for one or two of these. So I'll open the first one here. This comes from Mark DeWitt, and he asks the following. The panelists learned oral traditions in an immersive manner. It's practically impossible to recreate an immersive experience at my university. Do we have any advice on how to inspire students to take the personal initiative to immerse themselves? April, do you want to think about that?
I'm thinking about that and how difficult that is, because it's impossible to recreate it. I think the best thing that I can think of so far that I've come up with, and I'd be interested to hear how everybody approaches this, but is really encouraging them to go back to the source, to research and find various sources and versions of the tune. And sometimes that leads down a different pathway. Sometimes it leads to a video of a community event. You know, there's a lot of documentaries where you can actually see jam sessions or dances, that kind of thing, which can give a better context of what it felt like to be immersed growing up in a tradition. That's a really difficult thing to recreate.
Yeah, I know I taught for a long time in universities, and I was teaching traditional music, but sometimes the structure and the curriculum and the course didn't lend itself to that. So I set up a learning community, a traditional music learning community, where we would spend a couple of hours outside of the official curriculum, and we'd work on material, and we'd use it as an opportunity to maybe form little groups and ensembles. And then I would take the students. I mean, we've been to Canada, we've been to Denmark playing at festivals, and it kind of came as an extension of the formal curriculum rather than as any actual kind of baked in part of it. And so it does require commitment from whoever's leading the group, i.e. me, but also the students to commit to that extra time and investment. But I know the students I had were absolutely brilliant and were really up for it. And I know that those experiences were some of the riches that they had. So the university kind of facilitated them coming together, but this little extra nugget was there as well. So that's my tuppence worth on that as well. Sharat, there's a question for you. Before Trasa joins us again and wraps us up here. It's about a question wondering whether your tradition, within your tradition, the history of the music, the stories are all passed on, or whether it's just about the guru's own music and contribution.
Okay, so in Indian classical music, we just follow the tree. You know, from the 15th century, there was a big musician in the 15th century. His name was Tansen. So if you look at the tree, there are 29 generations. We have to learn about these maestros. So it's not only learning about your guru and knowing your guru, that's it. So basically the stories that we've heard from our teachers, guru is like their gurus, how they were and whatever he gathered. So how he was, you know, what was special about his playing, and all of that we used to discuss as a musical talk. You know, he would give me these lessons, and of course knowing the tree and, you know, your guru's guru, and you know how was the music situation 100 years ago, how was the music situation in India 200 years ago, how were these compositions made by these gurus, what were they thinking when they were making these compositions, and how did they design these ragas. So these are beautiful things, you know, that we have learned from our gurus. So it's not only that, you know, you stick to your guru and then that's about it. You have to understand it's a big ocean of, you know, learning, which you can, you know, get the knowledge from your respective gurus.
Fantastic. And I think as well as that, as teachers, we are all our own little community as well. And sometimes it can feel quite isolating doing the work that we do. So it's important to just reach out to each other. It's been just inspiring hearing all of your experiences, all of your stories. And we're all there to help each other and to lift each other up. We can't all teach everybody, and we have a lot to learn from each other. So thank you guys so much. And here is the lovely Tressa. Thank you, Tressa. And to everybody at Folk Alliance for organizing this. And I will stop talking now.
Well, I would like to say, first of all, a huge thank you to our esteemed and extra inspiring panelists. I also teach, and I was hanging on every word here. So thank you to Gamily Tordstro, Sharat Chandra Shrivastava, Liz Doherty, and April Virch. Liz, extra thanks to you for pulling this great panel together. And thank you to all those who have attended our webinar today. We hope that you found the ideas presented here useful to you. This webinar will be made available on our YouTube channel. Please take a moment to provide feedback in the survey that's going to pop up when you close this webinar today. Stay safe and connected, everyone. And remember that everything is passed from one to the other in this beautiful world.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We'll see you all next time. Goodbye, all.
Thank you all. Thank you. Lovely speaking to you all. Let's stay in touch. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.